Hi, welcome to Third Space Live. I'm Jody Peel, and this is a show that offers conversations, ideas, and stories built to build mental wellness in our community. Today, we're going to be speaking with Lauren Nutbrown, all about diet culture and disordered eating. But before we begin, I will remind you that you can learn all about Third Space Life Charity at our website at thirdspacecanada.org. You can also follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and you can view all of our videos on our YouTube channel. So I also want to say that today is July 8th, 2020, and this is episode 26. So before I introduce Lauren, I will tell you a little bit more about her. She has recently graduated with her Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology at UBCO Okanagan and is looking forward to starting this fall with her Masters of Clinical Counselling studies. She is passionate about promoting mental health, and she focuses her attention on eating disorder recovery and prevention. In Lauren's free time, she enjoys spending time with family, skiing, and yoga. So I will introduce you to the very friendly and kind and knowledgeable Miss Lauren Nutbrown. Hi, Lauren. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jody. Thank you for having me.
This is exciting.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here today and to be talking about something that I'm so passionate about. So I appreciate you having me here.
Well, we're really happy to have you because you're a great human, I'm starting to realize after knowing you for a very short period of time, but also because this topic is so important, and it's so many people in our society are impacted by, all of us are impacted by diet culture in the media, but too many of us are also impacted by disordered eating. So I don't know where you want to start, but maybe it'd be great to orient ourselves and the viewers to what diet culture is all about and how that's influencing us.
Yeah, so diet culture seems to be all-encompassing, especially around the Okanagan, but definitely worldwide. And diet culture comes from the conversations we have between people, the conversations that happen on social media, any type of media really. It kind of comes down to there's no way to ever be enough. So diet culture revolves itself and is very, very well funded by any sort of like dieting media. So the big thing would be like dieting companies, gyms, people that are promoting weight loss supplements, anybody doing like any sort of like boot camps and all these kind of things, kind of showing that it's more important to look a certain way in order to be important. So we see that a lot with any type of media involving anyone who's a celebrity. They have to look a certain way in order to be popular, in order to be someone that is going to get likes and follows and all these kind of things that have become more and more important. And it even goes down to the simple conversations we have at the dinner table about what we should and shouldn't be eating, really.
Right. So it's everywhere, and it's been here, it's been like this for a long, long, long time. But are you suggesting it might be getting worse? Is that because of technology and the internet and social media?
I think it's definitely getting more widespread because these conversations, I don't call them negative conversations, but these unhealthy conversations are happening so easily. So the biggest thing, one thing that I notice quite often is before and after pictures. Those are one of those big things that I've noticed are quite popular since the media has been pushing them. So kind of like what I'm saying is the before picture of what someone looked like before they had any type of weight loss, and the after picture of once they have. Those tend to be a lot more popular than they were back in my parents' age, for instance. And those.
Sorry, carry on. I don't know how to turn off that notification. Carry on. Sorry.
Back to it, Johnny. Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, okay. Technical difficulties, but yeah, so those before and after pictures.
Just to stop you there for a second, Lauren, we can edit that out.
Okay, that sounds good.
And if not, then everybody can just laugh along on with us because other people have had these problems before. Oh, sorry. You're right in the middle of a sentence too. Let's carry on.
That's okay. So maybe I'll just start again by talking about the before and after pictures. But yeah, so for before and after pictures, we have the before picture of what someone looked like before they lost weight. And then we have the after picture of once they have. And those pictures are definitely more prevalent since my parents sort of were looking at any type of media. And the issue with those is that we don't really understand how to gauge what the healthy person really is. Just because a person's lost weight in that second picture doesn't mean they're actually necessarily healthy. They could be struggling with a variety of different things that they never had to deal with in the before picture. They could be struggling with, eating disorders, disordered eating. They could be struggling with mental issues or now physical issues due to their weight loss. We don't know the whole story, but people tend to look at those pictures and see the weight loss and think, perfect, their life is so much better now. And that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, that example is so loaded in so many ways. I mean, just because someone looks a certain way, it really says very little about them other than how they look in that moment. And I didn't tell you this in the prep for the show, but I had a friend when we were in our studies together back in the 90s. She was hired by a company to do the before and after shots. They shot them in the same day. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors too, clothing, lighting, makeup, editing. So not only are the images often misleading and untrue, but the story they're trying to tell about this individual is unidimensional. All it is an image, right? But we've been trained to think that they're talking about health, which is really odd. Yeah.
It's honestly quite scary because, like you said, doing that in the same day, the people's perception about it is, oh my gosh, like, look at all the work they've done and this should be so great and I should be doing that, but it's not realistic at all. So yeah, I find it scary, setting up extremely high, unmanageable and unattainable expectations.
And it makes a lot of people feel really bad about themselves.
Yeah, that's what diet culture is supposed to be. Diet culture is made to make you feel bad about yourself so that you will buy into these programs, that you'll buy these supplements, that you'll buy this amount of time even exercising so that you can feel better about yourself. And it's a very, very weird cycle that they've set up, but it works very, very well for anybody who's profiting off of it.
It begs the question that, are you more susceptible to those influences if you don't feel worthy innately or valuable just by being who you are as a human, and so you feel like you have to look a certain way to have value? I mean, right?
Yeah, and that's like how we were talking before, Jody. So for a personal experience that I've went through is I had an eating disorder for around 10 years. I used to do competitive bodybuilding for a good portion of that. And I had the expectation, or I had built the expectation in my mind based off of the messaging that I had received that I wasn't enough, so I had to be better. So I spent a significant amount of time doing things to harm myself through my eating disorder that I never really needed to do. So when it came down to sort of realizing what diet culture was and how prevalent it is and how easy it is to fall into those messages, it took a significant amount of time for me, 3 years of actually being in a recovery program, even since now a year afterwards, still deprogramming those messages. So it sticks in pretty deep, I think, from the majority of people. I think it's quite hard to get away from.
Yeah, I have two comments on that. Question: do you feel like at this stage you can look back and feel like you were a victim to a lot of that messaging? And was it just the media, or was it coming from other places for you?
I think so. I guess I don't love the term victim, although I do agree that there are. But I guess you could say I was a victim to it.
Did you get these messages from your peers or your family as well, or?
I think my parents did a good job at not doing those messages the best that they could. But I think in terms of my peers and social media and everything, yeah, I was definitely a target. I was an easy target. And then in terms of being set up for it, I think that I had, after a long period of time, I deal with anxiety issues. I have ADHD. So there were a couple of insecurities that I had that had already built up since I was quite young. And because diet culture is so all encompassing, it was easy for those messages to sink in and kind of really explode. I definitely felt like I wasn't enough the way that my body just was. It had to be better, or else I wasn't going to be someone that people could really look to and feel any sort of like credibility with, I guess. Like I had to be better in order for people to want to be associated with me, I guess.
Or to maybe?
Respected as well too, but more almost like being a part of it. Being included was a big thing. I wanted to feel included.
So do you feel comfortable telling us more about what your unhealthy relationship with eating and exercise look like? How did that, what did your day look like or your week look like?
Yeah, so I think it was 18 where it started on the path towards quite unhealthy. But I was in my first year of university at UBCO here. I didn't realize how my ADHD was impacting my studies, and being away from home, not having my regular support systems around, I would often eat to comfort myself. And after a very short period of time, that turned into binge eating. Mm-hmm. So whenever I was upset or feeling uncomfortable or, just wanting to disconnect or overly stimulated by the environment, I would turn to food. So at that time at UBCO, there was only one cafeteria, and we had pretty limited food options. But there were certain like small groups of things that I would really like, and I would eat them in excess, and I would eat them in private if I could. So I would go down to the cafeteria for dinner time. I would pick out whatever food that I felt like I wanted that day. I would bring it back up to my dorm room because I didn't want people to see me eating in such large amounts. And then I would eat until it hurt, and then I would keep going. So that happened for about like whatever it was, 8 months that I was at school. I came home for summer. I was around my regular support system. Those habits all dropped. It's like, wow, like I totally attributed it to just being unhappy and, unhealthy at school. So go back the next year, same habits start happening again. I get stressed. This is what my coping mechanism is. Over time, I could see my body starting to change, which is normal. Regardless of the eating or not, your body changes over time, and that's okay. But at the time, I didn't think that. So I started to experiment later on. I think it was a couple years down the road. I started to build on different eating habits, as well as adding in an exercising component of it. I had always been sort of active in sports and stuff like that to an extent. But at this point I decided to try weightlifting, and I fell in love with it immediately. I would go to workout classes. I started getting a trainer. My trainer happened to be involved in bodybuilding competitions. So she sort of introduced dieting to me in a way that I had never seen before. And at that point I thought, okay, I need to exercise a particular type of way to look a certain way. I see these people living these lives that I think are really healthy and really cool. They look like they have a lot going on for them. So I'm going to exercise like that. Also, I'm going to start dieting. So I started using calorie counting apps. I started looking up, became completely obsessed with looking up at food. I would spend the majority of my time when I wasn't at work or wasn't working out, looking up diets and how I can manipulate things to make my body feel and look a certain way. And I started lowering calories more and more and more. And as I began to lose more weight and started to look more fit to people, I got more compliments. I got complimented every day on how I looked. Wow, like you're doing so much, Lauren, you're so busy. Like your life looks awesome. Every single day, all the time, encouraging these bad habits. So it progressively got worse. I started doing bodybuilding competitions. The first competition that I did, I dieted, I don't even remember what particular weight it was. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, but it was significantly low. I think my body fat percentage was at 9%. At that point, I hadn't had a period in, I think it was over at least 2 years. And body fat percentages for women should be significantly higher, even if you are an athletic female. So my body, you know, like I said, I was still getting these compliments, so everybody thought I really looked good, but they didn't realize my digestion was completely shot. As soon as the competition was over, I had 4 months in my mind until I was going to start, you know, dieting and doing a competition again. My body completely rebounded. I gained so much weight. My digestion was, like I said, completely shot. I couldn't even digest normal things like broccoli because the fiber was interacting with my stomach improperly, and I would look pregnant and bloated. I'd hurt every time I was eating, but once again, I was going back to those old eating habits. So I'd eat until it hurt and then kept going. And it was just this cyclical thing. But because I was working out so hard, even though I had gained weight, people were still admiring my work ethic. So it just kept the situation, it kept getting worse and worse. So it eventually got to the point where I was in the hospital at least once a month. I couldn't get nutrition from most foods because my body just was rejecting a lot of the things that I was eating. So because of that, my immune system was lowering and lowering, and I would get a cold at least every month. I was getting weird things. I had shingles pop up. Shingles shouldn't pop up. They typically don't pop up until much later in life.
Yeah.
My body was just under so much stress, and I started seeing a naturopath. She tried to treat me for about a year, and I could tell every time I was going in there, I was one of her most exasperated clients. I could see when I walked in, she would instantly be like, okay, deep breath, Lauren's coming in today.
Oh my God. I get that from people too. Don't worry about it.
It's not a good feeling when you know that's happening. So it was about a year in. I had been working around someone who I knew had an eating disorder. She was quite open about it. And I'd been kind of like noticing things that she was doing that were quite similar to what I was doing, but I didn't want to accept it. A lot of people in my life now were starting to change their messaging. The people that were close to me were starting to be like, hey, Lauren, like, we're just wondering, like, why can't you eat broccoli? Like, why is it not okay to have a treat after dinner? But realistically, and that they couldn't see it. Why can't you do all these normal things? So I went back to my naturopath. All the stuff that she had done to help treat the bloating and like the digestive issues, the immune system issues, like none of it was working. And she's like, Lauren, I think it might be time to start looking at your relationship with food. And I just lost it crying. It was kind of my light bulb moment. So I reached out, I got home. This is typically what happens when people realize that they have an eating disorder or that they want help, is they get into this moment of acute anxiety and stress where, okay, now I realize the issue and it needs to be solved like that. So I had a complete panic attack, raced home, started looking up what eating disorders was, like what they were, what were the symptoms, how was I actually, like what were my symptoms and did they actually even relate? Like there was just so many question marks in my head. And then I ended up finding the Cologne Eating Disorder Program online. They got me involved there, and I went through 3 years of recovery there. And I am internally grateful for them and all their support, because at the time I wanted to recover, but I didn't think it was possible. Now that I've, had those 3 years time in the program, it's been a year, I think it's almost my year anniversary, which is kind of nice of being outside of it. Thank you. Oh, yeah. It's one of my favorite accomplishments. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it definitely took a long time for me to realize recovery was even possible. And now that I know it is, I also know it takes a long time. I'm more excited to talk about it. And I'm more open to sharing with people what my experience was like, because
I'm glad you are doing that, because that's the only way to offset all the messaging we talked about at the beginning of the show. If you're not hearing the other side of it, we're failing people, especially young people. So good for you. Could you tell me a little bit more about that moment when your naturopath talked to you about maybe you should be exploring your relationship with food and then you had a breakdown? Was that because deep down you knew for a while that this wasn't healthy? Yeah.
If you're that fit, you shouldn't be in the hospital every month. Doesn't make any sense. I knew that at that point, after, I'd been going to doctors for these digestive issues and all these kind of things. And every time I would go to the doctor, they'd be like, we cannot figure this out. And as soon as my naturopath told me, it was like all of a sudden it just like hit me like a brick. And I was like, I'm doing this to myself.
And you didn't put those pieces together, or you were in denial, do you think?
I was in denial. Yeah. I really didn't want to believe that my eating was a problem.
Yeah. Well, it just, when you were talking about how for the longest time people were giving you positive feedback a lot, for something that you now knew, or even deep down at that time you knew wasn't super healthy for you, it occurred to me that that's the difference between some other addictions and addiction around food or dieting, because you're absolutely right. Imagine being addicted to gambling or to a drug, let's say, and people were constantly congratulating you about it and encouraging you to do it. That's bizarre. I never even thought about that before.
Yeah,
wow.
It's the craziest thing, because I'd wake up in the morning, I would already be feeling guilty about the binges that I'd had all day before, but I'd wake up in the morning, I go to work out, I try to work out as many possible calories as I possibly could. I'd weightlift to build as much muscle as I could. So I spent all this time in the gym. Then I'd come home for lunch. I would try not to eat too much for lunch because I'm trying to make sure that I'm compensating for the day before. I'd go to work, I'd be starving all day, I'd be grumpy, I'd be hungry, my stomach would be hurting. I'd get to dinner, I'd eat as much as I possibly could. Once again, now we're at the point where my stomach is hurting. I've passed my limit with food. I've binge ate too much in such a short period of time. Then I'd get off work, I'd go home, and I'd binge eat as long as I possibly could. So basically the standard for me was I would come home, I'd open the cupboards, I'd stare at the cupboards, I have an internal conversation with myself about, don't eat this, you don't need it. Okay, maybe you can have one cookie, just one cookie, that's it. I'd eat all the cookies, I'd eat pretty much everything I could in the cupboard, then I'd go get Menchie's, I'd eat a big thing of frozen yogurt, then I'd go to get groceries to restock, I'd eat as much as I could in the car, and then I'd go to bed in pain, super bloated, super gassy. I know it's always like something that people are embarrassed about saying, but it's realistic, like super gassy, super, super hurting. And then the cycle would start the next day again.
So in our pre-show prep, you spoke to also living with bulimia for a while. How did that come into part of your life?
I had denial about bulimia for a really long time. So bulimia is binging and purging. And I didn't realize that the purging part could have a variety of different looks. So I believe that bulimia was binging and then purging by vomiting. I never vomited.
Yeah. Okay.
So I thought that I didn't have bulimia because I didn't vomit. But for me, my purging was over-exercising. And my purging was also by using laxatives as well, especially during competition times or when I thought that I wanted to lose weight for a photo shoot or whatever it was that I was doing during that bodybuilding time. So I didn't realize that there was more encompassing with that. So when I first started the program at the Colonial Eating Disorder Program, they set me up with a doctor. The doctor had to diagnose me with whatever it was. I didn't know at the time. Then I met with a psychiatrist, kind of a similar sort of process. And then they put me into the program. I didn't know what I was diagnosed with. I knew that they were putting me in the program, so I knew I had some sort of eating thing. I knew that I binge ate a lot, so I had, in my mind, I had binge eating disorder. And so it was the first meeting that we had. There was, I can't remember what the meeting was called, but it was the first meeting that we had. And at one point in the meeting, at that particular time, the program, it's changed now, but the program at the time, they were saying that they didn't treat binge eating disorder. So I'm sitting in this meeting and I'm like, why am I here then? This is what I do. So why am I here? I'm so stressed out. We leave the meeting. I'm crying. the program was just changing buildings. So they were just hiring new people, and I was talking to the dietitian that they had. And I was like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, can you please tell me what's going on? She ended up telling me that I had bulimia, and I was absolutely shocked. And I was really embarrassed, to be honest with you. I thought that having bulimia was something to be embarrassed about. It took me a really long time to come to terms with. I needed to understand what the definition was and how it really presented itself. And then once I understood, it took a really long time to accept that that's what I had been doing to myself for a really long time. It was really hard.
Maybe you could help us out understand what that program looks like. Is it residential, or is it a day program, or how many times a week do you go, or how long do you go for, that type of thing?
The program, they've changed a couple things because I've been out of it for a year now, so I can only speak to when I was in it. But the program, you have to be diagnosed by a family doctor, and then you need to have a meeting with a psychiatrist, as far as I can remember, and then they get you involved with the program. The program, I think now, and it could be different, but the program was 18 months at a time. And if you needed to stay in longer, they would reassess, and you can stay in longer if you needed to. So for me in particular, I believe it was just about 3 years for me that I was in the program before we assessed that I was able to start transitioning back into doing my own thing. I set up so that I could have counseling outside, like private counseling, so that I could have someone there for the transition. But with the program, we had a doctor, psychiatrist, we have a therapist, there's a dietitian, and then you do groups as well. And the groups were probably the best part for me. I was super nervous about going to group because you have to be vulnerable about your life with, all these people. But it ended up being the best thing because they were vulnerable back, and we learned so much from each other on how to really cope with things and how to create better patterns for ourselves. So yeah, the group therapy was probably my favorite.
So did you go every day for so many weeks, or was it a couple times a week, or did you stay over, or I don't know what it looks like. I know nothing about the program. So
yeah. So the program, the program was an outpatient program. Okay. So I lived at home, but I would go to the program at the beginning. I think it was sometimes up to 5 times, like an hour appointment 5 times a week. So it was quite extensive. But it varies depending on the person. It varies depending on like the severity, what their schedule is, how much they need. They're pretty flexible with that, but you do need to be doing at least 1 group a week. And then there's several other like different things that they have mandatory for you to commit to in order to be doing the program. And then there's also, if needed, they can refer you off into a program that's in Vancouver, which is an inpatient program where you live in a particular space for, I think it's 3 months, either more or less, and you're in it full time. So that's one I didn't do. I thought that it would be better to do the outpatient program because I could learn how to transfer those skills into my normal day, like everyday life over time. But there were quite a few times where I questioned whether I should be going to inpatient or not, because I did, with recovery, it's not a straight line, it's very up and down. So I relapsed quite a few times through the program, but they were there to support me with it. So yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to circle back a little bit, something you spoke to earlier about that you live with ADHD and you had stress in your life. Tell us a little bit about how emotional or stress or maybe mental illness or any kind of negative emotional aspect to your life, how does that correlate with this, if it does?
Well, with dieting culture, that's what dieting culture feeds off of. So if there is sort of like any stressor going on in someone's life, it does make them more receptive to having any type of eating problem. So with stress can either heighten your hunger signals, so in terms of binging, or it can suppress them. So a lot of times when people are feeling super, super stressed, they can feel like their stomach feels smaller. Over time, those sort of things can turn into coping mechanisms. So I'm feeling stressed, my stomach feels like tight and smaller, I'm not going to eat. But realistically, during those times when you're stressed, you need to be able to fuel yourself so that you can be able to have that energy to be able to cope with the stress. So it's kind of like a loop. And then the same thing with binging too. Binging becomes something that you do for comfort. But when you binge, a binge means that you're going past the point of your hunger signals. You are finished eating, but you continue eating. And so it can kind of perpetuate that as well too. When you have, any sort of type of mental or physical health issue, it makes that stress more, and it kind of all just goes together. So, yeah.
We were also talking about gender and eating disorders and disordered eating. Maybe we should start there, because we're trying to create a unified definition of disordered eating versus eating disorder as preparation for the show. And I think what we came up with was that when a disordered eating, whether that's eating too much, too little, the wrong types of foods, when it becomes extreme enough, it becomes a problem and impacts your life negatively, then it becomes an eating disorder. I think that was is that kind of what we figured out?
Yeah. And just in speaking about the gender portion of it as well too, I think it's sort of put out there that men don't struggle with eating disorders. That has not been the experience that I had in the program. There were men that looked a variety of different ways that struggle with eating disorders as well too.
So I asked you this in our prep, it's not just young men, it's not just super fit men, it's for goodness sakes. Is that the same with women? So did you find the women that were in the program also different ages, different stages, different levels of fitness, different sizes, shapes?
Yeah, and I think that's a part of the dieting culture thing too, is that people define eating disorders as looking a particular type of way. If someone thinks about an eating disorder individual, they're going to look at them like super fit and super thin, but that's not necessarily the case. It could be a variety of different body types, even ones that you and I would perceive as healthy. So someone who looks like completely normal and completely fine, and they have all their stuff together and they dress well and they present themselves as very confident, could be struggling with an eating disorder at home. Doesn't matter if they're male, female, whatever gender like description that they'd like to use. Anybody is susceptible to eating disorder. I know a lot of the trans community as well too. It's a big struggle in that area as well, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. So this is a part of why these conversations are so important, is bringing that awareness to it, that it can be anyone, regardless of what they look like or what we perceive their lives to be.
Yeah, I'm just exploring my programming in my head, and I think that the first image that pops in mind when you hear about an eating disorder is a young female. Yeah, but what I hear you saying is it's all ages, all genders, all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, there were several people that I have known, in or outside of the program, that are in their 60s and 70s that have had either just started having an eating disorder within the past few years, or have been struggling with an eating disorder all their lives. And it's like I said, I think the messaging is more prevalent now with the boom with social media, but this has been going on since forever. Like I can recall several ads that I've seen from like way back in the day, where women were using these kind of like they have these kind of like straps around. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, to like it like shook you, and it was supposed to like shake off weight.
I wish.
I know exactly. So it was one of those things too. But even us just saying like, I wish, like
I just caught myself as exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
It's like it's part of that conversation of like, there's always a way that people are looking to look a certain way, but is it really important towards your quality of life? I would argue not.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, maybe what we should be aspiring to is to have a healthy physical life, and to do that you need to have healthy food and healthy level of exercise, and anything more than that isn't necessarily healthy. That whole idea of moderation we were talking about.
Yeah, and I think even when we say healthy too, is like we have to redefine what healthy looks like. Healthy is not eating. There's a term called orthorexia, and orthorexia is when people become obsessed with eating healthy foods, and that could be a variety of different ways. We see like the keto diet is a big part of that. We see people eating veganism, or sorry, not eating veganism, but prescribing to veganism. Veganism is a big thing that I think is important in terms for certain ethical issues, and I understand that and appreciate that. But in terms of dieting tool, it can be very unhealthy. So I think we need to redefine what healthy looks like, and healthy looks like intuitive eating to me. That is when you eat the things that make you feel good. You obey your hunger signals, when to start eating, when to stop eating, and you take off the shame and stress of eating as well too, and body image. And that is so nice and easy to say, but to actually do is extremely difficult considering what we're dealing with on a daily basis. So there's that, and then there's also healthy exercise as well too. Healthy exercise is one that I'm still working on myself. Exercise should be something that is enjoyable, not for pain. And when I'm saying not for pain, you shouldn't be putting yourself in a pain to be sort of dieting, or, you know, like I said, in terms of counting calories and getting those calories off, you shouldn't be exercising to compensate. So yeah, there's a lot to it, and I just think that healthy needs a good redefinition for our society.
Are you interested in sharing the story you shared with me about when someone asked you if you enjoy your exercise when you're bodybuilding? Because that was pretty impactful.
Yeah, my therapist and I, when I think it was in the first year of the program, and I had told myself that I was ready to recover. I told myself that I was ready to, you know, push past all that, the messaging and blah, blah, blah. But realistically, those messages were in very deep. So at one point I'm having a conversation with my therapist. I had been going to the gym towards like the end of my eating disorder. I've been there at least 6 hours a day working out, you know, working out outside the gym, whatever it was. So she asked me, she's like, Lauren, do you really enjoy working out for 6 hours a day? And I was pissed. I got up and I was like, yes, I do enjoy working out for 6 hours a day. I pretty much got in her face because I was so defensive. I just wanted to believe it so bad that this is, you know, I was doing this and I liked it. And she looked at me and she was like, you know what, Lauren, do you are you sure that you really enjoy that? And I just sat there for a second. I was like, no. And I just started crying. I'm like, no, I hate it. Realistically, I really hate it. And it was so much energy just to defend it that it kind of just like, it just snapped and I just crumpled. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. It was pretty brutal. And it took even a really long time after that conversation to sort of to heal my emotions with it, because I didn't understand what healthy exercising really looked like. Exercising and especially bodybuilding had become a part of my identity for so long. It was the thing that people complimented me on for so long that I didn't know how to look at my life without it. So, it wasn't like I could just cold turkey and be like, I'm not going to exercise as much anymore. I had to redefine what I enjoyed and what I really thought about myself in order to admit it. So it was pretty hard.
What is it, when you reflected on that, what were your true feelings about that level of exercise?
I was punishing myself. Yeah, I was punishing myself. Like I said, that binge eating cycle that I had, the next morning, it was every morning. I had to compensate for the day before. So yeah, it was a punishment for what I had ate, basically.
Fascinating. So your story is not to be offensive anyway, but it seems extreme compared to a lot of people who aren't bodybuilders. What about people that, I presumably there's people who go to the gym for an hour or two every day. that still might be there for the wrong reasons. You don't have to be an extreme bodybuilder or athlete in order to be having an unhealthy relationship with all these things. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's where I think it's like comes down to that definition of healthy again. We don't always know, like I can't look at someone and diagnose them with an eating disorder just as someone could not, like they shouldn't be doing that with me. So it really depends, that person that's going to the gym for an hour a day or, you know, doing what it is, it's kind of, there's the line between them being healthy and them doing something that's disrupting their life or causing them distress. When it causes distress to either their bodies or their health or their minds, that's when it becomes unhealthy. So that person could be going for an hour every day and that works for that person. They're perfectly healthy, whatever that means, and that's okay. And then there could also be a person going to the gym for an hour who they're actually really hurting themselves. So when they're going there, they feel like they have to, they're punishing themselves if they don't go. They're telling themselves that, you know, I can't be okay if I don't do this every day. And that's the more unhealthy mindset of it. So it really is dependent on the person and the situation.
So how could someone, do you have any tools or ideas of how someone who might be having some questions internally about their status of whether they're eating or exercising in a healthy way, what's the starting place for that?
I would say the starting place for me would to be look to see what you feel shame about. Are you feeling shame because you ate a piece of cake after dinner? Is that a regular occurrence that you're having, that every day after you eat like a certain thing in the day, you feel bad about it? Or like, why did I eat that? Or, you know, I wish I could have done this, you know? Same thing with exercise as well too. If you didn't go to the gym for one day of the week, are you thinking about it afterwards? Are you feeling ashamed that you weren't there? Are you going to try and compensate for it later? I think it's really important to start kind of looking internally at those conversations that we're having with ourselves and realizing, okay, what messaging am I giving myself now? If I don't go to the gym for a day, do I really need to feel ashamed of that? Or was I, you know, having a great day with my friends and family? Was I working on a project for school? Was I doing something cool at work that day? Was I having a bad day and I just didn't want to go and I needed to take care of myself in other ways? It's okay to have bad days too and not want to do those things. So I think that's a big thing, is first be having those conversations, like what kind of messaging am I giving myself? Am I giving myself permission to really just live and be happy and healthy? That kind of stuff.
And then to circle back to the beginning of our conversation with the messaging we're getting, I guess it would also make sense to start exploring where those messages are coming from, or where, yeah?
Yeah, and I think it's like, it's kind of how we were saying before, Jody, when we were first originally talking before we started doing the video, about having those conversations with other people as well too. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to know anything really. You can just ask people, like, what does healthy eating look like to you, and kind of just like see what you're hearing. And if you're at a dinner table, for instance, and someone's, you know, you're out for dinner, you're ordering food, if someone's ordering and they're like, oh, I shouldn't be eating this, kind of having those conversations and questioning and be like, oh, why not? Or doing maybe a different thing and being like, you know what, we're out for dinner, we're enjoying yourselves, go for it, treat yourself. Like having those conversations and making normalized eating okay, making cravings okay. Cravings are okay. If I had a chocolate lava cake last night, I craved it all day. I loved it. That was fantastic. And I feel really good about that today still. So making those things okay with the people around you so that they don't feel ashamed of eating, all that kind of stuff. We can start having those conversations and making, you know, challenging diet culture so that ends up going away and the healthy conversations start coming in.
So you're suggesting there might be an activist role here in order to break down some of these longstanding unhealthy messages. You can challenge them, like at a dinner party when, and I know I've heard this, and if I had a nickel for every time I've heard people sitting around before they order, oh, I shouldn't eat that, or I really shouldn't have dessert. You can stand up and say, why not?
Absolutely.
Why do you say that? What are you afraid of?
My ultimate goal for everybody is to have these beautiful conversations where they're like, why not? Like, do it, like, enjoy yourself. And so that the person afterwards, when they're sitting there and they had that piece of chocolate cake, being like, man, that was good. And then they move on with their life. They don't even think about it. Or they do think about it and they're like, damn, that was good. Like, you know,
I've also experienced that those are, I am a good little eater. And when I finally in those circumstances, I'd be like, well, I'm having whatever cake. And then often you'll get relief from other people. Oh yeah, yeah, me too. I'm gonna have dessert too, right? Like it's like they feel like there's a stigma around ordering dessert sometimes.
Yeah, I find it so interesting. Like it's, even with my family's awesome in terms of, they were really supportive for me throughout my eating disorder recovery. But when we're at the dinner table, for instance, and we don't talk about weight at the dinner table. That's a big thing. I would say like eliminate those conversations from the dinner table is a good start. We don't talk about food in terms of calories, restrictions, anything about like that kind of stuff at the dinner table as well too. So
That's
also
a
like,
good idea.
yeah, if you hear those kind of things coming up, not at mealtime. We shouldn't associate those kind of conversations with our dinner time. Enjoying having those conversations with people, at a different time where it has nothing to do with the food that we're actually eating. Because what that's going to do, if you're thinking about calories and all that kind of stuff while you're eating it, you're either going to like feel guilty about what you're eating or whatever it may be. It's not a good thing. I wouldn't suggest those.
The opposite of mindfulness.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I want to be enjoying that lava cake. So
This is actually a good segue to, I think, our final point today, which was commenting on how parents play a big role with their children in terms of these messages that can then end up um, unhealthy eating or behaviors in their kids, and how not only what they say but what they model. So please tell us more about that.
yeah, so like by all means, like I said, I'm out of recovery with this, so I am not an expert. I'm an expert in my own story and my own life. But the things that I've noticed is that conversations around the dinner table are so impactful, especially for anybody who's at a vulnerable age. So even outside of the dinner table as well too. I think the biggest thing is learning what healthy really is. So a lot of times you'll see, we talked about it, Jody, in terms of parents bringing healthy things like a healthy snack to a birthday party instead of, allowing their kids to enjoy a piece of cake. Those kind of things perpetuate the messaging that there's good food and that there's bad food. That is really hard for people to wrap their minds around, is that when you think of food as good or bad, it's like a lot of people, when they're told not to eat something, they're going to want to eat it even more. So it's making those types of conversations, normal for kids to start having. Say they go to a birthday party the next time after that and they see a person eating a kid of cake, and not a person eating a cake, a kid of cake, a piece of cake, and they're looking over at, one of their friends, and they're like, why are you eating that? My mom said you should be eating this. Now that kid feels, unhealthy, and it just kind of goes down the line. It builds up these mixed messaging signals of how to eat intuitively, and, can I eat a piece of cake and just have a couple bites and, now I'm full and no, I don't want it anymore. Instead of it being like, ooh, I need to sneak this little piece of cake so that mom doesn't see it or something like that. It builds up those binge eating habits. So I think learning what healthy food is really important for parents, or, learning what healthy food is, and that it's, not good or bad, and what healthy eating is, what intuitive eating is, and what healthy exercise is would be really important for parents to learn about, and then have those conversations with their kids as well too.
Presumably being mindful of their language too, and how they talk about food and how they tie eating to the way they look.
Exactly. Talking about bodies.
Dangerous.
We talk about bodies every single day. So when you're talking to a child, if a kid, a friend's daughter comes in, or your niece or your nephew, when they come in, not being like, oh, you look so fit right now, or, encouraging them to put on makeup, or, if they have their hair done a particular day and they didn't the next day, like, oh, you look so much better than you did yesterday. Like those little comments actually come out quite often with people, commenting about looks. And if we cannot talk about bodies with kids in a way that's good or bad, if we can talk about bodies in terms of like what they just are, that would be healthier for kids to understand.
Yeah, for sure. And the one that's really topical right now is it's summer and the bathing suit season, and there's been, I don't know how long this has been going on, forever maybe, but the whole idea of, oh, well, I've got to diet before bathing suit season, or I've got to exercise or do both, or I can't wear a bathing suit because I'm not bathing suit worthy. That whole conversation. What do you have to say about that?
That one, especially, you know, from doing bodybuilding and having to be in a bikini on stage, it's like I realize how ridiculous that conversation is. What is the purpose of going to the beach? What is the purpose of, you know, having this beach body? Like, I don't understand. Is it so much more enjoyable if you go to the beach looking a particular way?
I wouldn't know, but you would.
Going to the beach when I looked a certain way has never been different than when I've looked at, you know, at a different time. I've always had, you know, even when I was feeling insecure, it's unfortunate, but those messagings, that messaging that we get, that certain bodies are better than others, you're going to go to the beach and you're going to feel insecure about yourself. That's not healthy. When I go to the beach, I want to enjoy the beach. I want to enjoy the sand. I want to enjoy the sun. I want to enjoy being around my friends. Those are the things that we should be thinking about. Like, okay, the beach is coming in 2020. I'm super excited for it. I want to invite all my friends. I want to have a barbecue there. I want to create memories. I want to be sitting there on the beach wondering if someone's seeing the cellulite on my legs. It's just, yeah. But that's what dieting culture tells us, is this is what you should worry about. These are the things that you think about. And then once again, that cycle happens where you prescribe to all those, you know, diets, those exercise programs, whatever. That's why those cycles happen, but it's realistically not important. So
That's really helpful, because just you're making me remember how I was so distracted by the insecurity of how I physically looked when I was a younger woman, that it actually robbed me of those days, those wonderful vacation days or days at the beach, being so hyper focused on how insecure I felt in a bathing suit that I missed the whole point of being there in the first place. Right?
Saddest thing, especially like you know, if I go to the beach with my niece, I don't want to be thinking about what's going on with, you know, my body. I want to think about how cute she is and how much fun she's having and how, like, you were making a sandcastle or whatever. I want to remember those things.
Yeah.
Those are the parts of her growing up that I really care about. I don't want to be focusing on my body. And it's really hard. You know, I am not immune to diet culture still, even after going through recovery. Diet culture is still something that I have, you know, I will put on an outfit and be like, do I look good in this? You know, if I'm going to work or whatever, I'm making sure that my hair looks okay, or, you know, whatever. It's all these things. I'm not immune to it, but I continually have to sit down and have those conversations with myself and be like, what's really important right now?
And where's that voice coming from? Right?
Is it really that I don't look good today, or is it really that I'm just, diet culture is telling me that I need to be something that I'm not? Most of the time it's diet culture.
I think that the bathing suit example might be a good starting point for our viewers, that if they can relate to some of those stories we just shared about being more concerned about wearing the bathing suit and being in public in a bathing suit instead of the enjoyment of your niece or being at the beach, maybe there's a good, if you can relate to that, there's a good opportunity for you to start exploring this whole topic through that experience. So whether you're, regardless of your age, your size, your gender.
Yeah, and it's even the same thing, like with me being in a bikini on a stage. I was at the most fit of my life, and I was still on stage. I was getting compared to 21 other females that are all on the stage. Why? Like, why is that important? There's times where I wish I could have that conversation with my younger self and be like, is this something that you really need to be doing? Like, is this something that's really healthy? Why is this important to you? Whether, you know, your legs look better than this other girl here, what makes her less important because your legs look this way, or what makes you less important because she looks this way? Yeah, I wish I had had those conversations with myself when I was younger, but I'm glad I went through it now.
Well, I'm glad you were here having that conversation with us today and sharing it with everybody who's watching. So helpful and so brave of you to share your story. And you're going to be a change maker by having these conversations that not very many people have. So thank you, Lauren.
I really have enjoyed being here, and I'm really hoping that like even these conversations are helpful for me to learn to have more compassion for myself. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thanks again. Before we go, I'm going to remind everybody that you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. You can also learn more about our charity at thirdspacecanada.org. And thank you for joining us today. And we hope to see you again soon. Bye for now, Lauren.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.